This is Hockey Talk, episode number 5, where we chat about everything hockey. I am John.
And I'm Mike.
All right, let's go. Mike, the first topic is, of course, how did the Canadiens versus the Flyers go on Tuesday, April the 9th? Mike, I know they played each other a week ago, and I believe the Flyers lost 4-1. You were hoping that the Flyers would get their revenge this week. How did it go?
It was better safe to say nothing better than a train wreck. Uh, Everything that could go wrong did. The offense was dried up. The defense couldn't play defense. The goalies were not good, and they were hung out to dry a lot of the times. In a game that they needed to show up for and win, they did the exact opposite. Uh, so pretty much puts the nail in their coffin unless they can miraculously win the next 3 games and have these teams behind or ahead of them at this point start to lose their games. So doesn't look very good.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Mike, but we're going to take that and lead that into the second topic tonight. It was a listener request, Mike, and I thought it was a fantastic question, so I want to go over it with you. We want to talk about the final playoff spot in that very Eastern Conference that we're just discussing. It has turned into one heck of a race. Every day I look at it, there's a new team in that eighth final spot. So let's go over all the teams. And Mike, I'd like you to tell me what you think, who you think might make it. We did talk about this a little bit in our first episode, but with new information comes new thoughts. The Flyers are the farthest back at the time of this recording and only have 3 games left. Everyone else has 4 games. Mike, what do you think the Flyers' chances are?
At this point, very slim. The only chance they do have is to win all 3 of their games, and they pretty much need to win them in regulation time to offset the tiebreaker that they would have with some of these other teams if they happen to end up tied with them when it's all said and done. So
Not good.
not good at all. No.
All right. Well, next it's the Islanders. They are currently in. The Capitals are in 8th spot and currently in. The Penguins are out. And Detroit is also out. Now, all 4 of these teams have 4 games left, which is kind of unique. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is going to make it, Mike? And who is left out in the cold? The schedule probably does matter, doesn't it? I know you've been studying the schedule. What do you think? And I mean, obviously, it's a toss-up. You could flip a coin. Anything could happen. But what is your best guess?
Well, I would say, like you said, it is a toss-up because each team has a few things that go for them and go against them. And when you look at Pittsburgh, they right now have the momentum on their side. So can they keep it going? And if they can, then they might be the favorite. But they don't have the easiest schedule going down the stretch, though, either. The easier schedule tends to probably be Detroit, playing a back-to-back against Montreal, who's a team that's not in the playoffs. You would kind of think that maybe that they would be the team with the advantage, but what kind of Detroit team is actually going to show up? If they can win those games against Montreal, then they would probably be the favorite to get in. Then we've got the Capitals, who have been, hit or miss. They've been struggled a little bit lately, but they're still in that spot. So their schedule too is an average schedule. They do play the Flyers in a game, so that could be a big game for both teams potentially. And then we have the Islanders, who are currently in, and I don't foresee the Islanders missing out. They were one of the teams that I thought was going to be in the whole way. And
that's right. You did say that, yes.
Yeah, and they weren't, and now they are. And I think, they've won 5 in a row. Patrick Roy's got them on a roll. They're playing Montreal tonight at home. So I think the Islanders are going to maintain their spot. And the last spot, tough to call. I mean, if you go based off of momentum, Pittsburgh is probably the team. But if you look at how the schedule looks, then Detroit could be that team. So, it should come down to those two. But I'm hoping against hope here and hope the Flyers can somehow manage to work a miracle here.
Well, stranger things have happened. I've seen some pretty strange things happen over the years. Now,
Yeah.
Mike, our listener also asked if we could, if it makes any difference for that 8 seed, if they just squeak into the playoffs, or do they benefit any if they're on a hot streak when they reach the playoffs? What do you think? I mean, after all, they are only the 8 seed team. Does it really matter?
Well, I mean, I believe it does matter, and especially I find that if Pittsburgh gets that eighth spot, uh, like I said, they've been hot. They've been on the go. They've got Crosby. They got Malkin. The team's playing well. When you're playing well going in, it's probably easier to maintain that momentum than if you just squeak in and end of the season right at the end of the year and like, oh, there we made it, we're good. You know, I think momentum has a big impact on how the team is going to do. Not saying they're necessarily going to win. However, I think it definitely very helpful for a team that's on a hot streak going into the playoffs if they're going to be playing against the number one seed.
Right, right. So, with these 4 teams that we're discussing about making this last spot, if any of them were to win all 4 of their last games and make it in, then especially Pittsburgh, I know there's probably some teams that probably don't want to play Pittsburgh in that first round. So, it might be dangerous. I don't know about Detroit, but anything's possible in the playoffs. We've seen it before. 8 seed teams have beaten first seed teams before, not the first time it's happened. So
Yeah, well, we seen a few years back, Columbus knocked off Tampa Bay
that's right.
last week,
Yes.
and you know, I'd like to meet the person that would have bet for Columbus to win that series because I don't think very many people would have. So,
No,
you know,
no.
stranger things have happened. So,
And then Columbus couldn't win the next series, though, but they sure
right,
won that first one.
yeah, yeah. So,
All right. Well, the third topic, Mike, is I know you want to list some more prospects that could benefit their teams next year. So
yeah.
why don't you name some players off and tell us what you think of them?
All right. So for next year, few guys that I want to talk about. One who came up and played a game. He only played one game this year and is with Buffalo. Is Yuri Kulik. Had an excellent World Juniors the last 2 seasons. He's played very well in the American Hockey League. He's primed to come up next year and be one of the top rookies. So he's one to keep an eye on for next year. Another one is Ivan Miroshnichenko of the Capitals. He came over this year to played mostly in the AHL, has come up for the last, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. He's been up with the team. He should still maintain his rookie status, I believe, going into next year. Uh, and I mean, he's going to get an opportunity to play on the top 2 lines, I believe, next year with Nicholas Backstrom most likely retired. I mean, with the injury
Right.
that he's had, so some doors will open for him. And I mean, they've given him some chances this year. He's looked all right. So I think playing with Ovechkin potentially, or being on the same team as Ovechkin, whereas they're both from Russia, definitely will be helpful for him. We have Will Smith of the San Jose Sharks, who's been playing in the U.S. college ranks this year, but he's primed to make the team, I believe, next year. San Jose is going to have so many doors open for players to come in, whereas they really don't have a lot of depth. I mean, and he should be one of their top scorers even next year, starting off. Then we have for the Anaheim Ducks, we have Olin Zellweger, who's the defenseman. Now he's also come up and played some games this year. He was with Team Canada for the World Juniors. He was one of their high-scoring defensemen, so he's going to get a good opportunity in Anaheim. And I believe his ascension is part of the reason why they were able to trade Jamie Drysdale away this year as well. So Anaheim's got some depth on defense when it comes to prospects. So I think he's going to get a crack next year. The other one is Brant Clark of the LA Kings. He's got a little bit of playing time in this year. With the Kings being a playoff team, they haven't really used him in high leverage situations, but he's an offensive defenseman. Uh, their best prospect, and he's one of the top prospects, in the NHL when you look at some of the rankings. So I think he's the other one to keep an eye on next year as well.
Cool, cool, very cool. So I know that Anaheim, they give up a crap ton of goals, but they have a
Yeah.
lot of good young players. I mean, how long do you think it'll take for the Anaheim Ducks to become a force to be reckoned with? Because I don't think it's going to take, well, it could take a few years. What do you think?
Well, I thought that they would be better than they are right now. But Trevor Zegras, who was their top guy, has really not played well at all. He's been hurt a lot. So I think he needs a reset. Like I said, he missed a lot of time due to injuries this year. Just hasn't played well in general when he has played either, which is quite surprising because he was, looking to be like one of the next big things here. So I think that they've got a lot of young players, but I think they need to surround them with some better veteran players. And when I say
Right.
better veteran players, I'm not talking like third line guys. They need to try to get some guys that can still put up good minutes and put up some good points and be on the top two lines. They've got Mason McTavish, who looks to be a really good player as well. And I think they just need to surround these guys with some good veterans that are still productive, that are not at the tail end of their careers. And I think that's one of the key things for the Ducks to improve going forward.
Okay, very interesting. Well, our fourth topic for this evening is Mike, I want to know what teams you would be most afraid of playing in the first round in the playoffs, both conferences, and why. And it doesn't have to be you just pick the two best teams. Yeah. Who do you think? Who would you be most afraid of in in both conferences?
Well, if I'm in the Eastern Conference, I'm probably afraid of Tampa Bay. They're in a wild card spot, but I think we all know they're far better than a wild card team. That division is so strong that only three teams technically are guaranteed a playoff spot, and then the fourth is a wild card. And I mean, Tampa's far from a wild card with their power play number one in the NHL. Like,
Unbelievable how good their power play is.
dominates, just dominates. I mean, Kucherov, Hedman, Point, Stamkos, whoever else they put out there. Uh, with those guys on the ice, yeah, I mean, for the last, I believe it's the last month or so, they're scoring one out of every three power plays, which
Yep.
is it's insanely high, a number like that. So you can't take penalties against them. They will score.
No.
I mean, and they've got Vasilevsky, who's done it all twice, and he was hurt to start the year, struggled at the first couple months, but since since he seems to have got back on track just in the new year, he's been pretty much lights out most nights. So you can't sleep on Tampa Bay. So they're dangerous. Even though they're going to play one of the top teams, it's not going to be an easy matchup. The other team, is I find Dallas is probably a bit of a threat because they've got the goaltending, they've got the defense, and their scoring is very spread out. So they have
Right.
four lines that are very capable of scoring goals. So always a threat as well. Those are two teams that Dallas is probably more of a favorite. However, I think that they're dangerous because of their depth, and I think they're one of the teams that have the most depth out of all of the playoff teams. So,
Right. In our hockey market here, you don't hear much about Dallas. They don't get a whole lot of publicity.
right,
Colorado does, Edmonton
yeah,
does, those teams do, but not Dallas. You don't hear much about them. You hear more about Vegas here than you do Dallas. Very
yeah.
quiet.
I
So,
think too with Dallas, I find this year more so than last year is they've spread the scoring out amongst their lines even more this year. I
right,
mean, their top guys from last year, Robertson and Hintz and Pavelski, uh, they're not they're not at the same scoring pace as they were last year, but the other guys have improved. So that's what will make them a little bit more dangerous, is having some of their second, third, and even fourth line guys stepping up and scoring goals.
Excellent. Well, our fifth topic, Mike, is something I saw last night and I wanted to talk about. Last night's game between the Vancouver Canucks and the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes are 34, 40, and 5 out of a playoff spot. They went into Vancouver last night, April the 10th, and won in overtime 4-3. Dylan Guenther, the guy had 4 points on his 21st birthday. Pretty good way to celebrate your birthday. He gives him 31 points in 42 games. Mike, is Dylan Guenther the real deal? Do you believe the Coyotes will be a better team next year?
Absolutely. They're a better team this year than they were last year, and the team can only get better. Only real weakness on that team is their defense. They don't have any high end defensemen per se, and I believe most of their defensemen are free agents this year or next year. So they have really nothing like signed for defense. And with Arizona, like they've got good scores. They've got Schmaltz, they've got Keller. Hayton was supposed to be one of their top guys this year, but he's been hurt a lot, and so that kind of hurt his production. He's been hurt most of the year. Um, Machelli, they're getting some third line guys that are scoring goals. So, I mean, I think Arizona can produce the offense if they had, a couple better defensemen that could be a little more helpful in the offensive zone. They'd be more of a threat. Their goaltending's been decent this year. Both goalies have played well, Ingram and Vimelka. So, Arizona, I think, is going to be a team that should be pushing for a playoff spot. But I mean, when you're looking at what their ownership situation is with where they're going to play, it
Yes,
certainly affects, I think, the team somewhat. So, I
that's
mean, I
true.
don't know how much that ownership is going to spend on players under the current situation. So, until they can sort that out, but once they do, they're a couple defensemen away from being a decent team, I think.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up because we had been talking amongst ourselves, not on air, about how Phoenix has been scoring a lot of goals lately, really
Yeah.
outperforming some teams. So I thought it was very interesting to see them go into Vancouver and win last night. So
Yeah,
do you?
well, one of the things that I had mentioned just when we had our gathering to watch the Montreal Flyer game is in the last 6 games that Arizona has played, they've only scored less than 5 goals. I believe it was once in the last 6 games up until last night, and I mean
Right.
they
Yes.
won the game last night anyway. So uh, I mean the offensive talent is there. It's a matter of keeping the puck out of your own net by having a little bit stronger defense core. Um,
Right.
so I think it's not easy to go out and get high end defensemen. So they've got their work cut out for them to do that. But if they can do something in that regard, they could be a threat.
Should the Vancouver Canucks be worried about this loss before the playoffs? I was looking at their record the last 10 games. I believe they were 5-4-1. So, I mean,
Yeah.
nothing spectacular. What do you think?
Uh, I'm not particularly worried if I'm Vancouver. I mean, their number one goalie has been out for over a month now, and I mean the difference that you're getting in nets is huge between Demko and Day Smith and Seeloff. So I think that with him coming back, and there's talk that he might be back Saturday night. So if he can come back and be in top form, you know, the Vancouver's in the playoffs anyways. So I don't think the games that they've played they weren't life or death games. So if they win or they lose, it wasn't overly critical. I mean, if they maintained their pretty much 500 while Demko's been out, and that's all they really needed to do, I think. So getting him back is going to be a huge boost. So uh, I'm not too concerned if I was the Vancouver Canucks.
Okay. Now, Mike, is there anything else you wanted to discuss on tonight's show? I know there is something you wanted to mention. Why don't you bring it up for our listeners?
Well, there's one thing that I want to discuss, but I think we're going to save it for next week. Is the current NHL playoff format? There's been a lot of talk lately about the pros and cons on it. So, I think that's something that we can delve into a little bit more in depth next week and get
Right.
into that, what people think and what the NHL may do to change things if they do. So,
Right, right. Well, it'll be a good segue for our all playoff show next week. So,
all right.
all right. Well, Mike, it's been great chatting with you. Remember, folks, like, share, subscribe. It really helps the channel. And later, guys, talk to you soon.
Later.